This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. This is Sex Talk. I'm at Madison Square. I'm deliberately here to record this. It's a Sunday night, and it's because this park is very near the Sex Museum, New York City Sex Museum. And that's MetLife Tower. It's famous. It was once the tallest building in the world. And this is the Flatiron building. Nobody calls it a tower, but I believe it was once the tallest building in the world. Prior to that one, prior to Woolworth, and after 3 on Publishers Row, I think, near City Hall. So this is my second attempt. This is not a series. A series is where you think you have new material and you start again. You're kind of in a theme and it updates. This is not a series. This is an attempt to say one thing, but say it better and say it more concise. So I've listened to what I did the first time on Sex Talk. One fear is now behind me. That fear is that I would somehow, first of all, it was in the first 24 hours my most popular video ever, and when you are soliciting attention like I do, like any blogger does, and all of a sudden you get attention, it's possibly addictive. I'm not addicted. My attention has been on sex this week, no more, no less than it was before. So I'm not turning into a blogger who focuses on the topic of sex. However, this is an attempt, again, to repeat what I did before, say it better, say it more concise, and it's simply this. The trouble I had last time is I know the content of what I want to say. The trouble I had in the first, this is the second, in the first was audience. Who am I speaking to and why? Fundamental, necessary, predetermined rule for any public speaker. It's not true for any blogger, because bloggers have a lot more slop, or at least if you're a blogger and you give yourself more slop, then you haven't. So who's my audience and what is my content? The audience is very simple. Sex Talk. This is the idea of birds and the bees and this wildly overt sexual culture is just an outdated topic. The idea that a mom has to talk to her daughters, a dad has to talk to his sons and explain sex is a foolish notion in today's sex drink world. We have Madonna is one to think about it, Like a Virgin. She sang in 1984, decades ago. So, but it is also very clear that a sex talk is needed. I still think one of the best examples is Eliot Spitzer. Several features of Eliot Spitzer, sexual crash and shame and disastrous career ending, was when he was the governor of New York and he ended up deciding he needed to use prostitutes. He not only needed to use prostitutes, but he made it really complicated. He did it on professional business. He did it out of state. He made arrangements for New York prostitutes, had them transported out of state. This, for a man who was a former attorney general, knows exactly how people get caught doing their crimes. He had every reason to believe he would get caught, though it did not change his behavior. The nice thing about Eliot Spitzer, he's also confessed to the mega stupidity that he exercised by ending his career the way he did. It also cost him his marriage. So
who am I speaking to? Ideally, I'd be speaking to 3 children. I'm a father of 3 once was. One died, so I'm the father of 2. I don't have the idea that I will ever get the 2 of my son, my surviving son, university-age kid, and an adult daughter. No fantasy that they will ever be in my audience, but that is the idea. So what do people need to know about sex as adults? And that's the content of what I'm going to speak to. And I'm going to leave this idea behind that I am a father speaking to a son and a daughter about sex. I don't believe I'll ever have that opportunity. But if I did, I would say something like I'm about to say. So now I'm changing my audience, keeping my topic, changing my audience, pretending I'm Dr. Phil. Okay, I am not Dr. Phil. I'm not qualified. But here's the difference. I've been around a lot of professionals who are qualified to talk about psycho-emotional trouble, to talk about sex anomalies. And the difference, listening to them, they speak more from their own experience, more from their client experience. And the education, the credentials they have is really not central to what they do. That's central to being paid. So this runaway fantasy that I'm Dr. Phil speaking to some audience, if I were charging people or if I were a guest on a show, I would need to have some credentials. I don't have those credentials. Haha, what a catch. My audience is not paying, and listeners, just because you're listening, it says you're doing it voluntarily. The internet could take your attention in any direction at any moment. So therefore, as a blogger, I am qualified to speak as if I were Dr. Phil, though I know humbly I am not, or any other professional with legitimate qualification. So that's a setup. From here, it's relatively simple. Who am I speaking to? Anyone who wants to listen. Why? Because I think adults need a sex talk. Por ejemplo, Elliot Spitzer. What better evidence do we need? And that list could be 100 long, including Arnold Schwarzenegger and Donald Trump and Matt Lauer and trying to think of a woman, and I can't. So what is the purpose? Sex talk. Who needs it? Not adolescent kids, not puberty age kids. Instead, who needs it? I think it's self-evident. Adults tear their lives apart with sexual misbehavior. It's common. And also it tears relationships apart. So there's my segue. This is about marriage. The other fumbling thing I had last time is I didn't know how to refer to marriages that weren't marriages. It is very clear that a marriage, the gay marriage equality, marriage equality was absolutely essential and necessary because people needed to have the rights as a legal spouse, even if you were the same sex. The people who fought it, I think, were absolute fools. It's here to stay, and amen, alleluia, assalamu alaikum, mazel tov. So I stumbled on that. So I'm going to say a marriage or a hookup. I'm going to say a marriage or a marriage-like relationship. The bottom line is a relationship that is some involvement of sexual monogamy, or at least a pledge, or at least a thought that there will be sexual monogamy. And in addition to that, the idea that it will go over time. So that relationship, if it's a marriage, is going to have a legal binding agreement. If it doesn't have that agreement, it essentially has one, because things, when the relationship ends, both parties lose something. That could be a house, that could be friends, that could be money, that could be cars, it could be a lot of things. But whether they're married or not, they have something to lose by ending it. That's what I mean by a marriage. So when I say a marriage, I mean a marriage or a marriage-like relationship. And that is, of course, lesbian, homosexual, heterosexual, or gay, male, homosexual. So with that behind me, now we're talking about marriage or marriage-like relationships. So here's marriage is made to be too complicated. Marriage counseling is made to be too complicated. If you realize on the outside a marriage is only three things, it's some type of legal relationship or an acknowledgement that there's something to lose by ending the relationship. There is a cohabitation, and there's just this general assumption that the two have plans to grow old together because they don't have plans to grow old with anyone else. They may not have said this overtly, but it is inferred that they have plans to grow old together. They have reason to believe the other partner is on step with them in the idea that they'll grow old together. So that's a marriage. On the outside, anyone looking at a marriage, they're legally married or equivalent, cohabitating, and this idea they're going to grow old together. On the inside, they are sexually monogamous, or at least one another believes they are for most of the time. So here's the problem with marriage counseling and marriage in general is it gets complicated, but it's not complicated. If people address personal problems as personal problems and that can be very serious problems from drug addiction to depression to just social troubles, coping with life, not dealing with loss very well, loss of job, loss of loved ones. Any personal problem remains a personal problem. And the burden on the marriage becomes nothing more than we're legally married or equivalent, cohabitate, plans grow old together, and we're having sex. So what is sex? If sex is recognized just as a man and a woman, two gay men, or a lesbian couple coming together and sharing orgasms, that's all sex is. It doesn't have to be good sex, but there does need to be some sense of mutual pleasure. Now here's one of the problems, is that the whole idea of female masturbation is just a topic that is taboo, and it shouldn't be. So women that do talk about it, it's quite common. It doesn't sound any less common than what it is for men. So if marriage is supposed to have some type of shared orgasm, some type of shared sexual pleasure, this should be pretty easy, because we all know it's very easy for men to have orgasms. The Me Too movement has told us that very clearly. Men can even do this. Some of these perverts like Harvey Weinstein more or less did it as a demonstration in almost any environment without any preparation, any seduction. Just grab the hands, jerk off, done. Happened very fast. Now, if women can do the same thing, why not share that together? Why not have that in a relationship? They don't have to sleep in the same bed. They don't have to sleep in the same room. You don't have to share meals together. You don't have to have vacations together. You don't have to have the same friends. Just keep that bound together. The legal marriage or equivalent. Continue to cohabitate. Live in the same place. Have different entrances. Have different bedrooms. Have two kitchens. Doesn't matter. And then finally, this idea that you're going to grow old together. Well, that's inferred. Nobody is foolish enough to realize the relationship might not end, so that grow old together might not happen. But nonetheless, if you're dealing with your personal problems independently and you come together to share orgasms, then this is a beautiful relationship. And if they're going to grow old together, eventually the appetite for sex declines. It should be very easy to keep that practice going, even easier. And there you go. By default, you end up growing old together. So that's the whole topic. In summary, who am I speaking to? This fantasy that I'd speak to my university-age son, my surviving son, or my daughter is a concept, but not in my mind. I don't think I'll ever reach that audience. So who am I speaking to instead? I'm pretending I'm Dr. Phil, not qualified professionally. No, I'm not qualified to charge for this. I'm not qualified to be a guest on anyone's show. But as a blogger, I am qualified. If I have listeners who are here voluntarily. And finally, what is a marriage? On the outside, you cohabitate, you have some type of legal agreement or some type of marriage equivalent, and plans to grow old together, you cohabitate. And then finally, shared orgasms. Deal with personal problems as personal problems. Boil the marriage down to its absolute minimum. Don't vacation together, don't eat together, don't share the same friends. You get together on some mutually agreeable frequency, focus on mutual sexual pleasure, and go about your lives. Deal with your personal problems as personal problems, and don't make it your spouse's, your husband, your wife's problems. That's it. I think it's relatively simple. Why is it so complicated? Because people bring their personal problems into their marriage. Their personal problems, if you can keep and deal with them separately, then the marriage becomes very easy. This has been Tom Duty. Middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. It's got, I don't know what the audio is capturing here, but if it's getting these kids, it's kind of fun. These kids were produced by some sperm joining some egg, and since they're chasing around by a would-be father, this would obviously likely be his sperm. They kind of look like him. So he's probably the father, biological father, and probably the husband of the mother who produced them. So it's been a nice background for my topic. Ciao from Madison Square Park, Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, New York City. Ciao, ciao, ciao.